Well, that relaxed me. Thank you, Peggy, Ambassador Holbrook, friends, members, guests. It is truly a great privilege to be here today at this luncheon honoring a remarkable woman, Vishaka Desai, and more about that later. I joined ArtTable in 1991 and have been guided in my career by this organization's commitment to helping to enrich our nation's cultural life by supporting women in the arts. I would not be here today without the strong network of women, and there were a few men along the way, who have encouraged me and helped me grow, starting with my mother, Ellen Dennison, who is here, who had the wisdom and foresight to convince a very independent 18-year-old to pursue a curatorial career, to my sister Deborah, who is also here and takes as much pride in my accomplishments as she does in her own, two stellar curators at the Guggenheim, Nancy Spector on one side and Alexandra Monroe on the other, whose curatorial vision and scholarship made me look especially good as a director, Jennifer Stockman, board president of the Guggenheim, whose outstanding qualities of leadership made her such a superb partner during my tenure and does such great work today. And just so many friends, but to signal out too, one, Carol Englander, who is my oldest friend here, goes back almost 30 years and was really the guiding light through my career transition. And Carol Saber, a newer friend, whose generosity of time and spirit have helped me at so many important crossroads in my life. So that leaves all of the rest of you in the audience, my deeply talented colleagues in the art world, with whom I have had so many meaningful interactions over the years. And I'd like to especially mention my new colleagues at Sotheby's, an unparalleled peer group who I have enjoyed working with since I joined the company in September. Now, whenever I speak in public, I think about the demographics of my audience. And interestingly, ArtTable's membership and even the attendance at lunch today is fairly evenly split between the not-for-profit museum sector and the for-profit business sector. Well, that's good news for me, because after 8 months in my new post, I can claim expertise in both worlds. I'm a very fast learner. And it is from this vantage point today that I want to offer some perspective. And in particular, I will speak about the intertwined nature of art and money in our current culture. You laugh, but that's the topic. My departure from the Guggenheim after 27 years as a curator and 2 as a museum director got a lot of ink. There was much speculation about the reasons behind this move, mostly suggesting that I could not work with our visionary foundation director, Thomas Krenz. And I've set the record straight 1,000 times, but I'll give it one more try. That couldn't be further from the truth. He was a wonderful partner. And the other was that nobody wants the thankless job of being a museum director anymore. But that is also not true. It was a dream job in every possible way. The simple fact was that I was ready for change, and believed that the current climate in the art world made the idea of crossing to the dark side, as it is called, a very intriguing proposition, and one that would build on the myriad skills that I had developed at the museum. My career began with the best possible classical training, working with director Thomas Messer and curator Diane Waldman. In those days, we didn't have budgets, we didn't have computers, we didn't have installation designers. We were simply curators, and I learned from the best of them how to organize exhibitions and how to care for and build a permanent collection. After 10 years of climbing up a very slow curatorial ladder, I began thinking about my next move, and also about the demands of my job as I began to raise a family. Now, even my husband claims he didn't know this, but I called Sotheby's to explore what kind of part-time work might be available to someone like me. They offered me a position helping to seat the auction room. Thank you very much, I said, and I stayed put. But I got the change I was looking for, although no less pressure, with the dynamic arrival of Tom Krenz, who was a forerunner in thinking about the need for a new model of museums in the 21st century. In a world where globalization was the operative word, Under Tom's direction, we built an international network of museums that would, in some ways, deal with one of the burgeoning crises of arts institutions, the lack of space to show permanent collections, and the demands that the display of contemporary art placed on our dated edifices. Given my experience with the global Guggenheim, when Sotheby's came knocking at my door last summer, and I will confess that there was actually another time in my career that I was seduced by the auction world, and 15 years ago almost became head of the contemporary art department at Sotheby's, so somehow this was a pattern that was repeating itself. But now I felt the time was right. After all, it would not be such a leap for me to work for a public company that had 92 locations in 41 countries and 1,500 employees worldwide. And after all, the art world is the art world, or is it? Wall Street Journal reporter Eric Gibson used my transition as a point of departure for an op-ed piece last August, where he wrote that until recently, museums and auction houses were perceived to be opposite sorts of institutions, their values so different as to preclude cross-fertilization. Museum curators and directors, he said, concern themselves mostly with aesthetic values, scholarship, and the life of the mind. When the value of a work of art was discussed, it was in terms of historical importance. Auctioneers, by contrast, were all about money. Value to them was dollars and cents. Given this oil and water relationship, there was no question of someone from an auction house going to work for a museum, or vice versa. But in the past decade or so, the walls between museums and auction houses had become porous. Museums, he said, are now more commercial, greatly expanding their retail operations, renting out parts of their collections, and staging exhibitions that seemed more promotional than scholarly. The auction houses, for their parts, have been reaching out to the rarefied world of museums, hiring former museum director Richard Oldenburg and Charles Moffat, for example, to senior posts at Sotheby's. Indeed, I have found porousness to be the case in the extreme, in ways that have more implications for change than even Mr. Gibson noted. The frontiers between auction houses and galleries, and between the primary and secondary market, are also blurring. The crossover in professionals is now fairly constant, with Xiaoming Zhang coming from the Guggenheim to form the contemporary Chinese art department at Sotheby's, or museum director Bob Fitzpatrick heading Christie's new gallery affiliate Hanscha Dennison, or former Sotheby's expert Matthew Strauss becoming the art advisor for the Hermitage Contemporary Collection, or Beatrice Rose having left MoMA for Pace Wildenstein, now returning to a curatorial role at the Menil Collection, to name only a few examples. Galleries and auction houses are indeed becoming more museum-like, with supersized galleries rivaling the best museum spaces in town, mounting exhibitions of an historical nature, complete with big-budget scholarly catalogs written by respected art historians. Auction houses, too, are in the business of exhibition, interpretation, and scholarship, even providing audio and docent tours and content-laden sales catalogs. Christie's show of Donald Judd's work, auctioned on behalf of the Judd Foundation, received a rave review in the New York Times by art critic Roberta Smith as the most beautiful survey of Judd's work ever to be seen in New York. A prominent New York art dealer pointed out that Sotheby's' Richard Gluckman-designed exhibition space is among one of the most attractive in New York, while some museum recent acquisition installations look like the auction houses used to look, an array of disparate and often minor works hung side by side in secondary spaces. But even more alarming is the notion that some of today's collectors of contemporary art admit to getting their art history from the 60-plus lots in our evening sales twice a year, not by walking through the more comprehensive historic overview provided by MoMA's collection galleries, which is how I learned my art history. What gets lost in all of this, of course, is the pure joy of the contemplation of the individual object. And for me, in my new position, I'm happy to say I haven't lost touch with the object. Indeed, my life centers around it because it is at the core of everything I do. But still, today's public is used to speed and turnover, the multitude of galleries with shows changing monthly, the rapidity of the art fair experience. In the words of Larry Gagosian, you snooze, you lose. The demand on museums to come up with ever more exciting exhibition programs and architecturally designed installations that will be as much as a popular as a critical success. The old values of connoisseurship, which I was brought up on, are not driving demand today. Instead, they are replaced by a new set of dynamics and a new definition of the term aesthetics and value, where money is often the correlating factor. Let me offer a few examples. First is the dramatic evolution of the contemporary art market over the last few years to become the biggest selling category for both auction houses, overtaking Impressionist and modern art. Warhol has moved ahead of Picasso as the world's most actively traded artist. At auction alone last year, Warhol garnered $422 million in sales versus Picasso, by comparison, at $319 million. With that comes the speed at which an artist's career is made or confirmed. 25 contemporary artists represented $2.2 billion of auction sales last year, a span of generations that include Lucian Freud, Gerhard Richter, Jeff Koons, Peter Doig, Damien Hirst, and Zhan Xiaogang. What does this group hold in common? Not much, I'm afraid, other than price. The turbocharged growth of emerging markets, Russia, Asia, the Middle East, and especially the Gulf, has also had a significant impact on the way we view connoisseurship. Indeed, we can't call these emerging anymore because China has solidly overtaken France as the third largest auction venue after the United States and the United Kingdom. 16 Asian artists are among the top 60 contemporary artists in 2007, ranked by total auction sales. And each successive auction of Asian art in Hong Kong, London, and New York has, of course, broken records set by the previous sale. America has become a net supplier to the auction houses. But those economies that are reliant on commodity-based wealth, whether natural gas, soybeans, or wheat, are fueling the art market with their purchases. At Sotheby's, new bidders for works of art over $50,000 have increased by 60% in the last 2 years, and in the contemporary field by a staggering 84%. Where wealth creation is today, there is art. Indeed, the person who has had perhaps the biggest impact over the past few years on significant acquisitions in the art world is a 28-year-old woman, and while I can't speak of her identity, stay tuned. You will be hearing a lot about her soon. That's a very brief overview about the change in the market. And what about museums? I mentioned earlier that the need for more and different kinds of space was one of the factors that has precipitated the global museum expansion and building boom. Yet even so, most institutions show only a fraction of their holdings at any given times. Museums are now experiencing slower growth of their permanent collections due to several factors. They are being priced out of the market by private collectors who only have to answer to their own impulses, passions, and bank accounts. Changes in tax laws have taken away a lot of the incentive for giving. Some of these would-be donors now may think twice about gifting artworks to museum, as the value of their collections have skyrocketed to become a major asset class of their family wealth. We are in a new Gilded Age that mirrors that of the late 19th and early 20th century, when the likes of the Fricks and Mellons, Rockefellers, Carnegies, and Solomon Guggenheim built collections that became the cornerstone of a whole new set of institutions. But today's titans of industry are forming their own private museums, in addition to or layered on top of those that are already in place. What will this worldwide phenomenon, the Ullin Center in Beijing, François Pinault's Palazzo Grassi in Venice, Victor Pinchuk's Art Center in Kiev, Don Fisher's Museum to Be in San Francisco, the Glenstone Foundation in Washington, the sovereign collections of the Emirates, what will these mean for the future? And another more recent phenomenon is the concept of the Art Foundation as lending library. Eli Broad, Glenn Furman, Adam Center, creating accessibility for many audiences while ensuring art doesn't wind up in basement storage, and relieving museums of the costs of ownership. Are these private museums merely monuments to the taste and resources of their founders? Do they exist to compete with museums, or rather to create alternative streams that are living, breathing, dynamic, and unconstrained by layers of hierarchy? I take heart in the fact that these collections are not being hoarded in private sanctuaries, but shared with the public. And as they develop, we are seeing increasing in professionalism with governance, scholarship, education programs, and curatorial staffs becoming a priority. What we need to focus on is how museums can coexist with and benefit from these new entities to create ever-evolving new models, new alliances, and partnerships, and avoid duplication of the same collections in absolute proximity to each other. Could one imagine, for example, as Eli Broad posited in a conversation with me recently, LA MoCA, LA County, and the Hammer Museum pooling their contemporary collection into just one dynamic, powerful resource? Is ownership really important? And as for the market, I was inspired at a forum co-sponsored by UBS and Sotheby's on the topic of Asian art earlier this week, hearing Alexandra Monroe acknowledge the significant role that the market has played in generating worldwide interest in contemporary Asian art. Yes, upward spiraling prices make it difficult for museums to build the collections they dream of or to woo works from donors. But the art is here to stay and has reached a critical par with the West. Alexandra's acknowledgement of this affinity and the recognition that geopolitical and economic realities are what make culture happen, both on the creative side and on the patronage side, made me realize the world has indeed changed. And to this point, let me say in closing that I am so thrilled to be here today to honor the extraordinary achievements of Vishaka, who has long advocated the importance of contemporary Asian art and has introduced work from Asia to broad audiences in her illustrious career at the Asia Society. I can think of no better person at this moment in time to receive ArtTable's Distinguished Service to the Visual Art Awards. Thank you very much.